All right, so what we're going to do is just read off your number 5s and then number 4s, number 3s, and et cetera. And we'll start with Shane.
All right, my number 5 is Neil Adams. A big part because of what he brought to Batman in the 70s. 70s, right? 60s, 70s. I've really felt he fleshed out the character for being more of a detective, more anatomy, really brought it from a cartoony type stance. Not that the previous ones were totally cartoony, but more detail. And since Peter mentioned it, I like the, in another discussion, I like the Green Lantern that his hair actually moves now. And I just picked up the Dead Man collection, and everything that he did in there looks fantastic. I can't wait to sink my teeth into reading that.
All right, Scott?
Oh, my number 5, hello, would be... Oh, it's Frederick Wortham, the seduction of the innocent author, the researcher into juvenile delinquency and its links to comic reading. Basically led to the comic code, the downfall of EC Comics and their great horror lines that were making kids go out and become zombies.
That's very dangerous.
Drink blood and everything.
It's terrible when kids turn into zombies.
Yeah.
I had a fun time when I was a zombie.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We all did,
Everybody loves it, but no, the adults, they don't want you to be a zombie. That would be my number 5.
Yeah, because comic books are so much worse than porn.
Yeah.
When it comes around, I mean, it's terrible. Yeah.
So a guy from outside the comic industry really influenced it for years.
Yeah, that bastard. Rat fink bastard.
Sons of bitches. For me, Jamie, you got Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the writer and artist for Superman. Technically not the first superhero, but probably the most influential superhero.
Well, he's the first superhero. You're Mystery Men. They were called like Mystery Men before.
Yeah,
that, so.
I mean, and that's they go with the Crimson Avenger as being the first. But like I said, definitely the most influential. His their creation still going today. So they're my number 5.
Cool.
All right, that's me now. All right, number 5. I got Frank Miller. Some people might have him higher up on their list, but I put him last on my list because he's more modern than most of the other people. And, he came on strong in the early 80s and then eventually redefined modern comics. He certainly redefined Batman for the modern age and just changed the way that we were allowed to view and create comics. And, comics were allowed to be gritty. I think they were in the beginning, but they lost track of that in the 50s and the 60s and started coming back. Neil Adams did some of that, but then it really, once Frank Miller came on the scene, he really gave a lot to that whole side of things. And I think, and it's certainly for modern, like for the artists and writers who are working now, they probably list Frank Miller as one of their influential people. He's now a god of comics. Or God is a strong word, but he's a grandfather of comics or whatever you want to call him.
I thought you were going to say you put him at 5 for because of DK2.
No, everybody gets a pass. Everybody gets one free pass.
What? Everybody has a blemish in their
absolutely.
record.
Oh yeah.
So that's where I give him.
All right, number 5 on my list is Alex Ross. I think what he brought to the comic industry with his art is just amazing. I think not only do I appreciate it, but I think outside of the comic world, we now have people coming in and looking at some of his stuff, and it's just amazing. And a lot of his stuff is also featured, like in bookstores and other places. It's like finally we're not so. They don't have to look at comic books and go, "Oh, it's all so cartoony." Well, no, it's not anymore.
He put it into the mainstream a little bit,
right? And I know he's not the originator. There were certainly some other, Frank Frazetta and some other people, but his work really, he's like the zenith of that kind of stuff.
I'll put it this way: my sister, who we lived together for a while, and she knows my comic collection, but she couldn't tell, if I put a John Byrne in front of her or I put a Jack Kirby in front of her, she couldn't pick them out. But every time she can look at Alex Ross and say, "That's Alex Ross."
Right.
Because he's one of my favorite artists, and I got a lot of his stuff, but his artwork and art style is just so distinct that somebody who doesn't really, know a lot about it can look at it and go, "Oh, that's Alex Ross."
Right. I think his work just captures the essence of every character, and because he also does things like he did a cover on The Village Voice of George Bush as a
love that
vampire
picture.
sucking the Statue of Liberty, her neck, biting her neck and drinking her blood.
Just as a quick aside to that, in the latest
new
issue of Wizard, I haven't got a chance to look through a whole lot of it, but they showed the picture, and I was amazed at the number of negative comments they got on that.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you show that Alex Ross owes an apology to the president? I'm like,
Oh,
no, he
please.
doesn't.
No, he's not.
Hello, First Amendment. That's what the
Yeah.
country was founded on.
Exactly.
People always forget that. It just drives me nuts. Oh, you can't insult the president. You have to insult the president. If you don't, we're just a monarchy.
Right. If they
It's
didn't,
un-American
if they didn't
to not
insult
assault
King George, we would not have been here.
Exactly.
So
I know I didn't want to get off on a
I know.
diatribe, but I was kind of
No, but I mean, I read that too, and that was I'm like, I was so pissed that people can't get
people
past
who
that.
read comic
Even,
books.
okay, I liked Clinton, but there were a lot of people who didn't like Clinton, and a lot of cartoons made fun of Clinton, and there was certainly a lot you could make fun of Clinton about, and you have to appreciate it for the value of that. These people have those opinions, and those were like that is first of all, the artwork is beautiful, and second of all, it's a really good analogy or whatever the word is, to see George Bush sucking the life out of the Statue of Liberty, because to me, that's exactly what he's doing to the country. Now, even if you disagree with that, you know that people have that opinion, so you can look at that and say, that's an excellent portrayal of that opinion. I don't like that opinion, but it does a good job of telling me about that opinion.
Right.
And that people are just short-sighted just drives me nuts.
The point, basically, the point behind that is that he has crossed over to other realms. I mean, he did start out as an ad guy anyway, but
Right.
not only that, but he did the poster for the Oscars, the 74th annual Oscars, and I just think that he just really just is just an influential creator. He also did the Super Grover thing for the Palisades. He did the image for Super Grover, so people know him. They know that his work sells, so he's my number 5. All right, number 4, Shane.
All right, my number 4, I actually had Alex Ross, and I crossed it out.
So you're not allowed to do that.
Just because of more recent things I've gotten into reading and knowledge of artists and writers in general that I've started amassing that I did not know. I put George Perez just because of the affection I have grown to have for his artwork and writing in the numerous discussions I've had with the group here and the numerous interviews that I've read, especially since they put out the Crisis hardcover. There was all sorts of interviews everywhere in the New Teen Titans stuff. Excuse me, I've really grown fond of his work and really am just thrilled to be able to read his stuff. So I put him as 4.
Mr. Powers?
I got another not guy as number 4.
That's fine.
I got the Image Comics guys. Well, it's 4 guys, 4 or 5 guys who started superstar artists again. They broke off on their own when basically for years everybody was owned by Marvel or DC, and what you did was owned by Marvel and DC, and what you ate for lunch was owned by Marvel and DC. What
Right.
you wore was owned by Marvel and DC. Whether I like them or not, and generally I don't like anything they did. At least they did it.
Right.
You have to
They
admire
certainly
that.
have their place in history.
They went
sure.
out and they said, we can do this on our own. We have our own ideas. We're bigger than you. Their egos are certainly bigger in many ways than many other people's, especially a couple of them. But they went with it, and they changed things. They made creator-owned the thing to do.
And it still is.
Yeah.
Still thriving.
And now even like Marvel and DC, they gave into it in a lot of ways. That creators have something to do with their characters. You can make something. DC does a lot of it with their Vertigo line.
And Marvel has it with the new Icon
Yeah.
lines, creator-owned projects.
Well, I also
That's
think-
just because Bendis rules Marvel.
Well,
and
that's
could
true.
do what he wants.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But also, like with Starman, that's it's and what was another one? well, Preacher, but that's Vertigo. But like Starman is so wrapped into James Robinson, they're not going to just willy-nilly bring back Jack Knight,
Right.
without his say-so. So, good
Yeah,
call.
That's what I got.
Do you think that influenced all the great DC Marvel hustle to sign exclusive contracts these days?
No, because they've always had kind of exclusive contracts. It's only been like in the past 3, 4, 5 years where it's suddenly been like newsworthy.
And I think the fact that there's the rivalry between the companies is kind of flaring up again is feeding
Right.
that. One guy gets one, and the other guys go, "Oh, we hate them. Let's get the other guy."
Yeah.
That's what you got.
Jamie?
Okay, my number 4, and I have to look at my list. I wrote it an hour ago and I forgot. Alan Moore. I have him as most influential. I really thought that when he came back, or actually when he started on this side of the pond writing comics, that he brought a more adult slant, and I'm not talking about adult as in porno. I'm talking about adult as in mature themes to comics, and really took comics and certain comics up to another level. I really think his writing was responsible for even creating such lines as Vertigo. I know a lot of people put that Neil Gaiman too, and I also put kind of Neil Gaiman in that whole genre of British invasion guys who kind of brought comics up, pulled them away from the little kids, and brought them into more of an adult world, and were really responsible for turning comics not just for entertainment for kids, but into literature.
I'm going to skip Brian just for this round because my number 4 is Alan Moore as well.
Oh,
So,
okay.
just I'm sorry, and what I want to add to that is you're right. I think his Swamp Thing run. Well, not I think. I know. When you read it, it's really responsible for the next 4 or 5 years of DC. I mean, there's so many things in that. When I finally read it completely, that I was like, everything for the next 4 or 5 years after it, from Animal Man, Adam Strange, definitely Sandman. I mean,
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman would not have done Sandman without Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
No.
Hellblazer,
Hellblazer.
Constantine. He really brought back a lot of the mystical characters, and everybody wanted to write like Alan Moore. Mostly everybody, and it was unfortunate because we got a lot of bad imitators. But I really think it was because of him that we were able to take chances. Mixed in with all of that too is also Karen Berger. I think as an editor, she just went out of her way
Very
to
smart.
smart
lady.
find all those British creators, and eventually after a couple of years it became Vertigo. So definitely Alan Moore is also on my number 4.
I actually had Alan Moore as number 4, but before we started talking, I changed it to Dave Sim. And the reason I did that, Dave Sim is the guy who does Cerebus, or did Cerebus. It's now over. But he started in the 70s, and I don't know at what point he decided it was going to be a 300-issue story, but it wasn't too long into his run, I don't think, before he decided that. Independently, he owned and does everything himself. Well, I mean, he has an inker, Gerard, but I mean, he publishes it in his own company, the whole bit. Wasn't under anybody else from the very beginning. And in the 70s, I mean, who published their own comics in 1978 or whatever? I mean, just small guys you never heard of or whatever. And he turned it into a huge thing. And I think, and he's always been very boisterous about how to publish your own comics, and he has lots of information. He's done articles and all kinds of things. I think he even wrote a special comic or a book or something, how to publish your own comics or something like that. And so he's been very into that. And every time we go to Wizard World, all Artist Alley is filled with guys publishing their own comics. And I think a lot of those people owe it to Dave Sim to really be able to believe that they can be a success at that. Because, Cerebus went on to be 300 issues long, told a full story, is very popular, very, very good, and people, I don't think, would have as much courage to go out there and try it themselves if he hadn't paved the way.
Yeah, he just missed my list. That was when, we talked about this. I was going to put him down on my list. He just... and the rest of my list, I think, is strong enough that you can say, okay, I understand why he isn't there. But I agree with you. Just purely from the self-publishing, influencing people who wanted to self-publish their own books, giving them a guideline on how to do it, and just the fact that he had the intestinal fortitude to do it, and he completed it, and now he's just sitting back.
Yeah.
Shane, number 3.
My number 3 is definitely my inner fanboy-driven Bob Kane and Bill Finger for creating Batman. I often feel that Bill Finger is left out of that equation, and from things that I've read and seen, I kind of think he was integral as well. So I don't think there's much that needs to be said about that. That's number 3.
I have number 3. I have choices, but I think I'll go with because I was going to put Dave Sibb because of the leader of the black and white self-publishing guys. He was just that. But I think I'll go with ElfQuest and Wendy and Richard Pini. And making comics girls-like.
Which is important.
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
there's not many of those. If a girl comes into a comic store and asks what she can read, and you point to the guy on steroids, and she leaves without it. But they brought female readers and a female artist, and there were female artists before her, Marie Severin, but she just starting girls into comics in those years was ElfQuest.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you said about, what do you tell a girl to read? I'm sorry, but those Adam Hughes covers on Wonder Woman, they're great, but they're not going to bring a girl in to read Wonder Woman. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, or Power Girl, know. All superheroes must have double Ds.
See, they fire off, actually.
They're actually missiles.
Yeah, they're big because they're built up underneath there. That would be my 3 for making.
That's a good choice.
A comic getting girls to read comics, or one you could give girls, and one that girls come into the store and say, "Oh, I have all of those. Do you have any more?" Or I'm looking for these issues of that. And
right.
Girls looking through back issues for ElfQuest.
Great. Jamie?
Okay, for me, I have number 3 in this. I know some people will probably put him with somebody else, but I'm going to put Jack Kirby by himself. Just simply for his visuals. I mean, you're talking Jack Kirby working on the original Captain America with Joe Simon. You're talking Jack Kirby during his years in the 60s when he was drawing everything at Marvel, to his New Gods and Forever People and that whole not genre, but that whole world that he brought to DC Comics. I mean, you can't read his stuff because his stuff is just terrible. I mean, his dialogue is just terrible. He was a great concept man, and nobody will... Sorry, Mark Evianier, if you're listening to me. But he was a great concept man, great visual guy, but he couldn't write dialogue to save his soul. And it was an interesting concept. Again, the whole... I don't want to get off on a tangent, but the whole New Gods thing was great concept, but he needed a writer. You saw what Stan Lee brought to the table with as far as Jack Kirby at Marvel, but Jack Kirby, his influence is just felt. Artists today, you talk to just about any artist today, and Kirby is either 1 or 2 on their list of most influential people. So I'll put him as number 3 for me.
That's exactly who I have as number 3, and for all the same reasons you said, and for the fact that when Marvel was getting started, they wouldn't have been able to succeed if he hadn't been there drawing literally 5, 6, 7 books a month, whatever he was drawing. He was all over the place.
Yeah.
And because his storytelling was good. I hate his artwork. I loathe it. I can hardly stomach reading a Jack Kirby book. But I see that the things he does in the panels are exciting as far as the storytelling techniques and the positions that he puts the figures in, and the way that taught people how to draw comics in a new way. Like, I'm reading this Batman stuff, and the Bob Kane is terrible. There's like no dynamic to it at all. Like, Batman is like in this stiff position jumping off a building, and it's like the same position he would be if he was running, or the same position he would be if he was falling backwards. He draws them, but just leaning backwards instead of leaning forwards. When Jack Kirby did a lot for the storytelling, and so that's why.
Yeah, when I first started getting back into it, or into it as seriously as I have gotten into comics, I agree with you. Jack Kirby, I didn't understand the love of Kirby. I looked at it, and you had these blocky fingers. You had
everybody looks like an ape.
The thick, furrowed brow, the thick eyebrows, and stuff like that, and the big machinery in the back. But as I've read history, and actually really read, I've read all the New God stuff, and I've read a lot of his early Fantastic Four stuff, and it's one of those art styles that grows on you, and I can see now how influential he actually was.
Especially the giant machinery, and the crackle around energy. Oh man, that was exciting.
Kirby dots,
the dots,
Kirby
the crackle.
dots, yeah.
Cool. You knew something bad was going to happen then. Dr. Doom was just going to blast you.
My number 3, you guys were talking about Jack Kirby, is actually Stan Lee. I think, it's kind of hard for me to talk about him separately, but he definitely was a pioneer. What he brought to Marvel, his ideas, he took risks, and as Kevin said once before, he scripted so many books. It's one thing to lay out a page of a plot, give it to your artist, and then you come back and boom, you got to write all that stuff for it. And yeah, he was kind of very verbose or whatever, but it was fun, and to hear him talk now, he still talks like that, and he's so cool to listen to. Also because he really brought a face to comics. He was Stan the Man, and he talked to comic readers, he talked to the people who wrote letters. He probably wrote a lot of those letters, but that's okay. So as a PR man, and just giving a face to Marvel, and kind of, with what he did, and his other editors or writers and artists, he kind of put the fire under DC's butt. So I have to give number 3 to Stan Lee. All right, number 2.
All right, Shane here with number 2. My number 2 is Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. For all the reasons you have all said, for the universe they created at Marvel, for all the artwork and influence that Jack Kirby's had, for the large proponent of comics that Stan Lee has become, even after leaving Marvel in his own endeavors. I just think that they have been such a powerful force in comics since they created Marvel.
Ooh, back to me. Okay. Well, we'll pick one. Well, he died recently. Is Will Eisner. And number 2 is because he was doing things in the 30s that guys were discovering in the 70s on how to do. And you look and it's like, well, he and his studio and what he was doing, that he was publishing things himself, that he was working for others, that he was creating things, that he was inventing new ways to tell stories, that he was telling all sorts of stories, crime stories, personal stories, that he just did everything. And if you look at it, he did everything. It's almost like he did everything first. Like, it was, there's so much stuff that was done later, like 30 years later, that he did, and people just kind of, he was the only one who did it then.
Yeah, I agree that he's sorely overlooked, and I wanted to put him on my list, but then when I was weighing all these things, it's so hard. 5 of all the people who involved in comics, and instead of getting everyone who was involved in the comics in the beginning, I opted for some newer guys to kind of spread the love a little bit, and because for different reasons. But I agree with you that Will Eisner is amazing and had a lot of impact.
The business and the art, he did all that stuff. He sold. He was a working artist. And that's what he did.
Cool.
Okay, for me, number 2, I have Stan Lee, and basically reiterating what
Jamie copied my list.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, you look good to me. So, anyway, just I had the pleasure of actually meeting Stanley at a convention one time, and I said to him, it was I just said to him, we wouldn't be here without you, and big Stanley smile, why thank you, and I got his autograph. It was really cool to meet him, but I truly believe that. I truly believe that his writing style and his books are what propelled the comics into what they are, what propelled writers and artists today into doing what they're doing. I mean, just over 100 issues of Fantastic Four alone. You figure the influence he had on an entire universe, creating it, and really, he just created this universe to compete with the Justice League. And to me, I look at the books from the era of DC to the Marvel era at that time, and there's no comparison. It's just the Marvel era. I just think it's just more intricate. There's just more going on. Stories building on stories, building on stories. He was just amazing. I mean, and God forgive him for the crap that he's putting out right now. But Stripperella and things like that. But from what he did before, it's just, I have to give him his due, and he's number 2.
Yeah, I have him as number 2 as well, and the obvious reason. Well, he created so many of the characters, whether or not Jack Kirby helped or John Romita helped or some of those other guys helped. With some of the creation of those characters is, of course, open for a lot of debate or whatever. But I mean, he was so instrumental in that, and also the guy's energy is boundless. I mean, he's 80-something and he's still so excitable and happy, and like Peter said, Stan the Man, and he made this image. Suddenly, when he came into the picture, he created a company in Marvel that the fans were involved with. DC just kind of sat there and put out books, and had put out books since the 30s, and we're still putting out books or whatever 30 years later. And Stan got the fans involved and created this company that was exciting and fun to be a part of, and read comics at that time, and created this whole energy around Marvel that DC lacked. Okay, Eli, the dog, get out of here. Go lay down. Go lay down. I can't even think about what I'm saying. He's getting tangled in the wires, and people are petting, and they're trying to make hand signals, and the dog doesn't understand that, Okay,
this is why I love live podcasts.
Yes.
We will never...
No editing.
You would never edit anything.
So let me start over here with what I was trying to say about this whole... And I don't think I'm communicating it properly.
No, I know exactly
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I mean, you're right.
The man.
Right.
Yeah, Marvel was
Which is why,
the people's company at that point.
Which is why you have all those Marvel zombies and the people who will fight to the death about Marvel because they feel like they are included. I think some of them are a little brainwashed, but that's okay.
But I mean that comes as a result, I think, of
you feel like
being
you're part
through
of
it. Like I even as a very little kid, I remember. Okay, I watched Challenges Super Friends or whatever. But then I also watched one of the Spider-Man cartoons, or I don't know if it was later with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, but Stan Lee announced it and did the welcome kids to the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, in that distinctive Stan Lee voice. He says, "I'm Stan Lee," and I was 8 or 6 or I don't know how old I was. I was a little kid, and I hadn't read a single comic book at that point. But man, I knew who Stan Lee was, and his charming, alluring, his voice is filled with. He's got so much charisma. You give Adolf Hitler a run for his money, I mean, and so here I am, a little
comparison.
Yeah, there you go. But here I am, this little kid who doesn't even know. I don't even know if I had seen a comic book. I'm sure I knew they existed. I can't remember, but I knew Stan Lee and I knew Marvel. And I watched the same cartoons that DC was putting out, but I didn't get that connection. I didn't get that involvement. He made me feel included. And if you were reading the comics, and I hear lots of stories about the college age kids or the high school age kids, when reading those first 60s books, yeah, the stuff you get from DC was pure crap at the time, real fluff, juvenile stuff. And along comes this, it seems juvenile to us now because we read it in comparison to today's comics. And you put it up against Sin City and you think, oh, it's made for 5-year-olds. But it wasn't. It was, and these college kids are going, man, this is cool, and it's the 60s, and there's war happening, and there's all these changes happening, and they're reading these comics, and it seems heavy-duty, and they're getting involved. And it's pulling them in, and that's why Marvel is a bigger company than DC is today, and I think a lot of that is because of the appeal that Stan Lee created about the company. Whether or not you like the characters almost doesn't matter. It's what he did with the company.
Cool. My number 2, we've just been having a whole discussion of Stan Lee. He was actually number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list, some people might find this blasphemy, is actually Julius Schwartz, who is, some people call him, he's like Stan Lee's contemporary or at the time. Julius Schwartz, when you look at the scope of his life and what he really did, he started out creating one of the first, if not the first, sci-fi fantasy fanzines, magazines. He was a sci-fi literature agent to H.P. Lovecraft, to who else was it? Hold on, I have my notes here. What's that? Ray Bradbury, Robert Bloch, Harlan Ellison. So when he was brought to D.C., they gave him like Strange Adventures and they gave him Mystery in Space, but he also was doing like the Golden Age Green Lantern. He was the editor helping out with that. But then 1956, comics were, it was all westerns and romances and monsters, and he said, we gotta have a revitalization, and he brought back Flash. He brought back Flash. He brought back Green Lantern. He brought back the Justice League.
All in Showcase.
All in Showcase. Yep. Justice League was in Brave and the Bold. He was the editor of Superman for years until the 80s. He was the editor of Batman, and I think what he did, he really is, for me, the father of the Silver Age. He understood that you could take a character and change it, keep the name, and change it, and you will get readers. He probably thought he was going to alienate a lot of those Golden Age readers, but he boosted the Silver Age, and it wasn't until 5 years later that you really got the Marvel Age. And as the story goes, Jack Leibowitz, who was the head of DC, was having a golf match with Martin Goodman, who was the head of Marvel, and was bragging about the sales success of Justice League of America. So Martin Goodman stormed back to Marvel and said, Stan Lee, you need to come up with something, and he came up with the Fantastic Four. So if you want to look at it pure, whether that's true or not, it's certainly, he kind of paved the way for Marvel, I think, for what they were able to do. Like you said, DC at that time, they were superhero stories. They had these people they had Superman who could, bowl with planets, and, they had all these fantastical characters, and then Stan Lee had the sense of making them very human. But as far as his place in history, I think I put Julius Schwartz as number 2.
Yeah, I'll again, another one that I would have put on my list, and I definitely agree with you as far as he was definitely the father of the Silver Age, with the Showcase, and Showcase number 4 with the Flash, and what many consider is the beginning, the first book of the Silver Age,
right? And
just his total revitalization of the superhero genre, and just a damn good editor. From everything I've read, from the testimonies after he just died recently, just listening to people, he was definitely a man ahead of his time. Definitely new talent, just was an overall great guy, and just knew everything, and was a great man.
Okay, here we go. Number 1 on your list. Go, Shane.
I put Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster just for creating Superman and giving birth to the DC Universe, which inspired Marvel to be created. And to a certain extent, if that hadn't happened, it probably would have been somebody else. But since it wasn't, I'll go if it wasn't for them and we didn't have Superman, we wouldn't have anything else since then.
I'll skip ahead to me because I have the same thing for largely the same reason. Their contribution to comics was relatively small, and that they basically did Superman and not a hell of a lot else. I mean, they were out of a job. The one guy actually ended up working for Marvel. I don't remember which one, but he did some remedial stuff for Marvel or whatever for a little while.
And it took him a long time to get profit from their creation.
But Superman is the most iconic. I mean, when the Joe on the street who doesn't read comics and never read a comic, some 50-year-old person who you just say, who do you think of when you think of superhero? And probably 9 out of 10 are going to say Superman. I mean, he is the superhero, and he's the American superhero. Even though he's an alien, he stands for America basically, and that's why they did it in the 30s when World War II was happening, and
think about who they were. Their parents probably were immigrants who came to America.
Exactly. So they're living the American dream by doing this kind of stuff, and they're trying to get ahead. And again, we don't know, but it's possible that comic books as we know them wouldn't even exist if they hadn't created this superhero, which became so popular. I mean, we said that there might have been another masked man who could have been a superhero that had already existed before Superman.
Well, there was the Crimson Avenger. He was more of a masked man. He had a mask, and there was also Dr. Occult. But
these guys weren't popular, and Superman comes on the scene, and almost immediately they're selling millions and millions of copies of Action Comics, and he's now the most popular thing, and kids are going nuts. And if the superheroes might have dwindled on for a little bit, and they might have died out, and then the westerns might have come, and then the next thing you know, there really aren't any comics, and maybe we don't have the whole superhero thing.
I often thought maybe we'd still be stuck in like the campy 60s Silver Age or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if we'd even have superheroes. Because, I mean, there was a time when there wasn't superheroes. There were gods in ancient history, and there were other things.
And pulp characters.
Yeah, but we never had. That's kind of an original idea, a guy with superpowers. And so, it might be a whole different comic world if that hadn't happened.
It's funny, the editor at the time, and I can't remember his name, or maybe it wasn't the editor, but someone else said, a man lifting a car over his head, that's going to scare everybody, and look what happened.
Right, and then if you read
Adventures of Cavalier.
The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, the novel, which is fictional but based on reality, and it's set in that time, and these fictional characters, their editor is talking about, oh my God, we need our own Superman. So it encouraged other companies to create more superheroes, which fed the flame. So again, if that superhero hadn't existed, no one would have fed the flame, and maybe that little flame of the Crimson Avenger would have just died out and been gone.
I often wonder if I think I heard a story where the origin and life of Superman kind of parallels them getting out of their original country, which I think was Germany, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember, but something about how it paralleled the events of the time as well. And really became the iconic character you said to give hope to a lot of people in the world at that time.
It was a big time. People needed a lot of hope all over the place. So Scott?
Oh, good. I can follow that. I was going to just do Lee and Kirby as one guy for creating Marvel. You could put Steve Ditko in there for Spider-Man.
Sure.
But it's almost like Steve Ditko doesn't want to be in there so much, so you can leave him out. Lee and Kirby for making comics now. Superman, if Superman had carried through in DC, it might all still just be the superhero craziness with Superman bowling with planets. 19 different kinds of kryptonite, all sorts of stuff like that. Super ventriloquism. But
that's my secret power.
Yeah. For making comics, what comics are now, you start with Lee and Kirby. And the writing of Stan Lee, and the ideas, and the art of Jack Kirby, and the ideas, and just pushing them together. Because one, without the other, could do good things, but together they were crazy then. They just worked, and they like build new gods. It's brilliant concepts, but it's really hard to read. Stan Lee, now his enthusiasm is there, but it's enthusiasm. It's legend. So these guys they're legends. They made Marvel comics, and Marvel comics are the comics everybody knows now. And they know Superman, but they put Superman and Spider-Man, they're all together to your average guy. And generally he would think, if you asked him a comic publisher, he would say, well, Marvel Comics.
I definitely agree there. Probably most people don't know that Superman is DC or
Yeah.
Batman is DC. They probably just don't know that because DC doesn't have their name out there like that.
That's what I got.
Okay, for me, the number one was Scott's number two. I have Will Eisner. Just to reiterate exactly what Scott said, I've never been a huge fan of The Spirit, which is his most iconic creation. Did that as Sunday morning cartoon, not cartoon, but Sunday morning comic strip for years and years and years. But if you look, I've looked at some of the stuff that he's done with that, and it's just amazing the visuals he puts into it, and the just some of the stuff he does visually with the pictures and the writing. And I've really loved most everything I've read of his, as far as his more autobiographical stuff, The Contract with God, the Drupsy Avenue, New York City, Family Values. He just did one recently. I can't think of
The plot.
Okay, there's one. It's like something. Well, that Last Days of Vietnam. There's one with I can't. It's something the Jew, not faking the Jew, but something. And it's just I want to get it because it's just come out. And I've read really good reviews on it, and but just for his overall influence, I put him as number one.
Did you already do your number one, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay. My number one is Jack Kirby. I kind of do separate him from Stan Lee for my own ideas, only because he crossed over and he constantly bounced back and forth from DC and Marvel and then DC. Excuse me. He started young. He was able to pump out at his height. I think they said he could do 20 pages a week of comic work, which I think is amazing. And there was somebody has down. I saw on a website he had over 24,000 pages of artwork in his entire career, and that's a number that I don't think anybody will come close to. Every time I look at the Jack Kirby Collector, which is a great magazine, it's like, when did he do that? When did he do that cover? When did he do that pinup? It's always like I'm finding new artwork from him, and his uninked pages are just amazing with the detail. As an artist, no, he doesn't have the correct anatomy and things like that. But what Brian said earlier is so true. He is able to capture the height of each pose and each battle, and if you were to draw the next second of like, say he drew Thor throwing his hammer, if you would go to the next second, it wouldn't be as dynamic. He was able to pick like the perfect moment in time. So for him to be able to draw all those pages, to come up with all those characters, and I think he is I would really give him more props than Stan Lee when it comes to the invention of the Marvel Universe, for the fact that when they did the Galactus saga, he threw in Silver Surfer, totally going to win. It wasn't in the plot or anything like that. He just drew this little guy on a surfer. He figured a big god like Galactus needed a herald, and Silver Surfer became one of the most popular characters. So I think his insight was really just phenomenal. Some of the other, just the things he's created, like with Joe Simon, Captain America, obviously, all the stuff he did in Marvel. Without his DC Challengers of the Unknown, you may not have gotten Fantastic Four. His New Gods work, Thundar cartoon, and I think somebody said this before. If you look at an artist, maybe not so much the newer artists, but people who were like big in the 70s and 80s, they're going to have Jack Kirby on their list as an inspiration. So for me, for the sheer amount of work he has done, there's a reason why he's called the King. So that's my number one.
And wow, I think That's a really good spot to stop for our mega 25th
Mega 25th,
episode.
yeah.
This is like the 96-page special, you get there. And we didn't charge extra on the cover price, just so you know. And no foil covers either.
Nope.
So
Before we go, though,
oh, yes.
Jamie does want to say something.
Oh, Jamie, that's right.
Just a little something. It's just
Okay, you have 10 seconds. Go.
okay. I don't know. Okay, bye. No, I just 25th podcast, and I sat down. I was looking at all the ones that I've guest starred on, and the best ones. And I've actually done over half of them. And I realized that, and I wanted to thank you two guys. I think it's great to hear other people come and say it's great, but it's also great that you're allowing us, the group here, to play in your sandbox, and it's a fun sandbox to play in. And to be honest with you, you guys listening out there, this is like this is what we do. I mean, to put it in a podcast is great. I mean, this is gravy. But on a Friday night after the podcast, I mean, hell, last week we did a podcast on Friday night. That was the special the Star Wars one.
Right.
Got done with that about 10 o'clock. We went downstairs to Brian's house, and we sat around until 3:30 that morning, just shooting the breeze, doing all kinds of stuff, playing
And
games.
we played Uno.
I say we played Uno for a while. We
missed
played a whole
Uno.
bunch of stuff. We played F Marry Kill for a while, which that was when we were getting tired, and that got really silly. I mean, especially the
Don't even talk about it.
I was going to say the Esther roll, Mrs. Jefferson, or that's the Florida Mrs. Jefferson, or Aunt Esther from Sanford and Son.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, my penis crawled back up inside my body. But anyway, I'm getting off on a diatribe. I just want to thank you guys for putting this together. Again, allowing us to play in it, and thank the viewers, thank the listeners for listening, because I just hope you're having fun. I hope something I said made you laugh. I hope something I said pissed you off. And I just want to thank Brian and Peter for putting this all together.
Well, we certainly appreciate that sentiment, and I don't, when I read about this podcasting thing a couple months ago, and I said, "Ooh, I should do a podcast," and I said, "Well, what should I do it on?" Well, of course, comic books, because what the hell else am I going to talk about? And then I said, "Well, I should do it with somebody," and I just kind of emailed Peter because he was at the time he wasn't really working, and he was around a lot, and I always see, because you just recently got into this regular work schedule, so I always just it hadn't sunken in my head that you would be available in the evenings, because I was thinking, well, Jamie, I was working all the time.
I was going to say my
and
retail work schedule.
So I emailed Peter. I was like, we have to do this, and he said, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And then when we started doing it, and the first 2 episodes sucked because our sound quality was terrible, and then I read a little more and figured some things out, and now it's like, well, now we don't really want to do it when it's just the two of us, because we still say it's Peter and Brian show, but really it's not. It's all of us. And I was even thinking about changing the way we do our intros and stuff, because it's not my show, it's not Peter's show, it's all of our show, and we get more compliments and more emails about the episodes where we have more than 2 or 3 people. Those are the better episodes, because it's more like hanging out with the guys talking comics.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, if there's something we want to just spout out, like news and stuff like that, we don't need everybody. But to do something like this, top 5 creators, to do something like some of our future topics, we need you guys. I mean, it's comic geek speak. It's not Brian Peter speak. So
Yeah.
I definitely feel that, and I love that Scott's here.
We can be sexy bitches too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I definitely resonate all those sentiments, because I just have a blast doing it.
So maybe we'll switch it up. Episode 26.
We
We'll have
are.
a different
We'll have a
thing.
new
I don't
intro,
know.
yeah.
I'll have to
We'll
think about
figure-
that.
We'll
We just
do
worked ourselves into a corner now.
You should start renumbering at number 1.
Oh,
We'll
have 2 openings.
Comic Geek Speak, Episode 1, Volume 2.
And we'll have a variant opening. You have
That's
to
right.
download
Yeah.
if you want to listen to
That's
it.
right. We'll have multiple shows. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, for making us have 25 episodes, and I'm sure we'll give you another 25 more. And we really appreciate you plowing through this. I don't even know how long it is now. With the 2 parts, it's got to
4
be.
years.
It's got to be 2 hours.
It's over 2 hours.
So, thank you for your patience, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.
Bye.